Hey, Scott, can you hear me?
Hey, what's up?
What is going on here? Let me get this fired up for the audience at home. Scott Greer, how are you doing today, man? Can you give the people, you were on the show recently, so I imagine a lot of people are familiar with you, but could you give the people at home a quick intro of who you are and what you do?
Well, I'm a highly respected writer and podcaster. I host the highly respected podcast. I also have the highly respected Substack at highly-respected.com, where I have plenty of articles and podcasts every day. And I also have a new book coming out this year called White Pill, The Online Right in the Making of Trump's America, which you can pre-order now at passage.press. And get a copy. You're going to love the book.
Let's go. I'm super excited about White Pill. I'm a big fan of what Passage is doing, big fan of yours, so I'm stoked to get my mitts on a copy. But what jumped out to me this morning, you put out a Substack article. The Europeans are crashing out over Greenland. I've seen you going back and forth with a few of these Euros on Twitter. And look, I love the Europeans. I was making the case on the show. I was playing Trump's clip where he talked about his heritage, and I was sort of laying out why Americans are sort of undeniably linked to Europe. Our fates are sort of intertwined in a particular way. But can you maybe outline what the rift is right now between the Europeans and Americans? Why does it seem so obvious to Trump supporters why we should control Greenland? Why does it seem to be not so obvious to even right-wingers in Europe?
Well, Europeans have decided that this is European clay, that this is territory that will always be a part of Europe, even though Greenland is not a member of the EU. It is, or it's not a part of the EU, even though it is controlled by an EU member, but it's not a part of the EU, but it's still subject to. Then this is a problem with American projects there and economic projects, that it's still subject to some EU regulations, which has been a problem for America. But that's another story, is that they have decided that this is territory that they're going to control and that this is their own, and they're annexing a part of Europe. So they view this as the most valuable thing in Europe right now, and that they are rallying to the flag of no, America is not for sale. Now, maybe in some ways it could be Trump's way of going about it in his typical Trumpian fashion of, posting memes and being, bombast might not be the best way to do that. But a lot of European leaders need to realize that this is Trump being Trump. And there's a way, and many of them remember him the first term. Many of them have known him for years. And instead of just going along and saying, this is Trump being Trump, we'll work out a negotiation, they have decided to make a lot of empty threats, hysterically shrieking over America, inviting China to do more projects there and trying to provoke us. I mean, they did a military exercise last week. Obviously, that's going to be seen as a provocation to America. They're all like saying that we're going to fight and defend this to the last man. Of some sorts of people are making these assumptions. And even at Davos, what they're doing is they're all trying to insult America. They're all going there and saying, oh, we don't need American support for defense funding. We can defend Ukraine on our own. Then why the hell were you guys flipping out last year when we were trying to make a peace deal? Mm-hmm. If you guys can defend Ukraine on your own, then why are you flipping out at us? And they reacted the same way when Trump tried to end the bloodshed in Ukraine, when he tried to offer a peace deal, when he tried to do this. All the Europeans flipped out and said, no, we're going to fight. We demand you continue to give billions to Ukraine and that this war continues on, even though it's not in our best interest for that to happen. And so they aggressively attacked us and insulted us and pretended that they can have their own Europe, free of America, and free of China, free of Russia, and I don't know how else they're going to imagine. So they just think that they can do these things and they can scold America and talk down to us like they're the superior power here. And Trump is tired of dealing with that because he knows there's a great power imbalance between America and Europe. But Europeans still imagine that they're the principal, and they're calling disobedient first grader Trump to the office to scold him about proper norms and how to properly guide the world. And, even some of the reaction to Greenland, instead of actually being like, oh, we'll try to have a serious negotiation, they smugly like, oh, you're free to invest there, and they just did everything possible to irritate Trump. And now we're in the situation that we're at now. And so, Europeans in some ways want to have, it's fine if the Europeans want to go, have a greater degree of independence and autonomy from America. If they don't want to, that they decide that NATO's not working out for them, I think that's perfectly fine. But in a lot of ways, goes along with a ton of delusions about their the state of geopolitics, their state of relationship with America, and they can't help but try to insult us and provoke us at any time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we saw after Venezuela where like they lined up to give denunciations. Even the right wing or supposedly right wing guys like Farage, for example, were coming out and they're like, it was impressive or whatever, but he violated international law. That's like their only recourse left to like signal that they have some like standing on the global stage, and it's just really frustrating to see. And then I think you're the one that pointed it out on Twitter when when Trump posted Macron's text message, where it's like in public this guy again is giving that like kindergarten level schooling finger wagging, but then he's like totally glazing him privately, and it just kind of shows that what's driving a lot of this really is insecurity about their standing on the global stage. And then there's this disconnect, like you just touched on. I mean, especially regarding Ukraine, where it's like on one hand, they'll position themselves as if they're client states of the U.S. and they expect, this umbrella to be provided with zero conditions, zero, strings attached. But then on the flip side, when suddenly Trump demands something of Europe, all of a sudden they're like this, we're on equal footing, and like Denmark is completely equipped to defend Greenland from, like other global adversaries. It's just so much. It's almost like kind of schizophrenic. And I know this is like a turbo Fox News boomer take. It's gonna I almost roll my own eyes saying it, but to a degree, these European leaders do have a degree of TDS. It's actually really something to behold. So I mean, is that a fair assessment?
It's an international virus infecting many people, and there's no vaccine for it either. We don't even know if we want a vaccine for it. We don't know what type of ingredients would be in that. But they do have this type of TDS. And the funny thing is, if Biden had asked for Greenland, they would have offered him at a discount, and they would have done like, oh yes. Or if Obama had, they would have been oh, Obama wants Greenland. When can we rush into it? We'll give it to you for free, Mr. Barack. Because, it's all these Europeans, they polled them in 2012. It was like 90% of the Europeans would have voted for Obama. And some of these Europeans who are right-wingers, they always try to imagine that everything bad in Europe is due to America, is that America must have made a fake poll showing that 90% of them wanted to vote for Barack Obama. They actually wanted to vote for, the Habsburg, a successor or whatever. But, they do this. If this had all been Democrats, and you have to even look at how Biden was treating them under his administration. They blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, which, we're now trying to claim was the Ukrainians, but, it's not hard to think that America had some involvement in it. And Europeans, when that happened, that's a huge humiliation. That is where a lot of their energy supply is supposed to come from. Yeah. And then they're like, we think it's Russia. It's like, why would Russia blow up their own gas pipeline? And they didn't do a damn thing. And this is a greater insult to them and a greater violation of their sovereignty than Trump talking about posting a meme about Greenland. But here, when Biden, blows up their pipeline, destroys their energy supply, makes a mockery of them, punks them, they, say essentially thank you. While when Trump posts some meme about Greenland, they act like they're going to go to World War III. They can't fight World War III, but they're going to pretend they can. And it's just insulting. If a Democrat asked for Greenland, they would happily give it over. They would put a bow on it. They would have no opposition towards it. And all of them had a much more respectful attitude towards, senile Biden going around who forgets their name, thinking he's talking to Mitterrand instead of Macron. And then they all in public, he's so smart. He's so cogent. Yeah. And then here, they're all insulting Trump in public, making these provocative statements with empty threats. And then the text message is like, oh, Mr. Trump, we love you. We're doing so many great things together. Why can't we work on Greenland? And so, but Trump responds to the public comments. And if he's seeing them being two-faced, he's not going to be happy with it. And so it is an attitude where, the world is changing, and Europeans want the world order that they were experiencing in the 90s and 2000s, where America provided their defense. America treated them as equals. I mean, and, we should treat them well, but, we're not equals on the world stage. Yeah. We're providing their defense. They're able to maintain their welfare state. They don't have really any problems. They can scold us about being stupid Americans or whatever. But, at the end of the day, it works well. But now the world's changing because we now have a new rising global hegemon and China emerging. Russia is trying to do expand its sphere, and the world is a changing place from how it was following the end of the Cold War. And Europeans aren't sure of how to adjust to this, and their economies are in a lot worse shape than they were, 20 and 30 years ago. They're, much more precarious. They were now having to be forced to do defense spending, and they have got even a far worse problem with immigration and a lot of other internal problems. And, they're in a precarious state, and they don't know how to adjust to it. And generally, the majority of Europeans do hate Trump. I mean, it is what it is. But, for some Americans, like, this is why we got to get rid of Trump. It's like, America first. We don't really care about what the world thinks of our leaders, as long as we like our leaders. But, so they don't know really what to do in this situation. And so they're kind of lashing out at the way the world's changing and trying to find a way to keep that world that they're secure with to stay there longer. Mm-hmm. It's not really working, and they still want to do these smug lectures against America, against Trump, because their population and they themselves hate Trump. And, if it's a Democrat, they did way more humiliating things and did much more obedient. I don't know if obedient is the way term, but, they had a much more undignified posture towards America when it's a Democrat enforcing this stuff. So, I find that, once it's just Trump in office, they completely change and want to pretend that they're defiant and resistant. They're members of the resistance towards Trump. But even with their threats over Greenland, they're not going to fight a war over this. I mean, we shouldn't have fight a war. We shouldn't invade. I think invading Greenland wouldn't be even very popular in America, because Americans, they're fine with military action so long as it's not sending boots on the ground or it's a limited operation without any casualties like we saw in Venezuela and elsewhere. But if you're sending boots on the ground, if you send like a division of Marines over or whatever, and, people are going to be, why are we invading Greenland? They're going to be, we interrupt the Super Bowl broadcast to bring you news about invading Greenland. And they're like, is this a comedy movie? Like, why are we invading Greenland? So it wouldn't be popular here. We shouldn't do that. But Europeans have to realize this situation. And if it's in our national interest to have a greater control over Greenland, which it is, I think it's necessary to negotiate. And it's not, this future of Europe does not depend on Greenland. And even a lot of Europeans probably weren't even aware it was a part of Europe or part of a European member state until now. And then, they've got a lot of other issues to worry about besides Greenland. I mean, there's a way we can do about it more diplomatically. And Trump, in his speech today, said we're going to use diplomacy. We're not going to use force. We're going to work this out. And, even with the tariff threats, I think that's a little unnecessary and too coercive and leaves a bad taste in the mouth. But I think Europeans need to come to their senses, realize that they need to make a deal, and stop trying to provoke and insult Trump and America.
Yeah. Well, before we get into the other themes, I just want to settle this score quick, because you made the point. It was like van der Leyen, like yesterday, she gave this speech at Davos, and she was like, "We're cutting a deal with India. Like we're turning to these emerging powers. We're going to cut a deal with India." And of course, that just translates to we're going to flood Europe with Indians. Like this is very obvious what's going on here. So I just want to settle the score real quick, because you have a lot of these, like the point you made, where you have these guys on the right in Europe who are like, if we can just get the Yankees, if we get that boot off of our neck, then we're going to like elect all these super based politicians. And then you like look around at what their base politicians are up to, and you're like, no, that's likely the future. I mean, Vox is a train wreck. Reform's a train wreck. The AFD is probably one of the better right-wing emerging parties, and even they have like some weird leadership questions. They have like a lesbian running the show. So it's like this entire idea, this LARP that's existing on the European right, where they're like, if the Americans would just get out of our business, we would like you said, like re-elect the Habsburgs. It's like, dude, that is just not the reality on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, I support the right-wing parties. I think they're fine, but they're not the ones in power, and they're having to struggle with these bureaucrats, and they keep electing people of Angela Merkel type. I mean, I don't know many people who would claim von der Leyen is based. Von der Leyen, I mean, she did come from the center-right party, but she was even considered to the left of Merkel in that party. But at the end of the day, these are their leaders. They're the ones who they pick. And even with the mention of the India deal, is that if they totally turn on America and they give us the middle finger, they're going to have to find other backers, and they're going to go to the third world. They're going to go to the non-Western world for support. So they're more inclined to make these deals and to work with these foreign powers because, India, China, and all their places, they're emerging forces, and they have a lot more sway over Europe or in these negotiations than would have happened 100 years ago. The age of European imperialism is over, right? Right or wrong. I mean, you could say that I'm not one of those people who's like, this is terrible of European colonialism and the empires were terrible. I'm not one of those people. I think there was a lot of great things about them, but they're not coming back, and Europe is in a far weaker position, and America shielded them from that vicious reality of the world around them. And now if they go on their own, they're going to be realizing that now India can dictate terms to them. Now even maybe Pakistan could dictate terms to them, and the Gulf states can certainly dictate terms to them. And if they make these deals with China and India, they're also going to want to flood the country, because in China's negotiations with Trump over the trade deals, they want to insist that Trump will not limit the foreign student visas. And China would do the exact same thing. If they start to do these partnerships with China and they're like, oh, now we can do immigration restriction. No, they're not, because China and India, who are they going to make deals with, are going to demand that they accept their people, because any deals they do with across the globe, they want to have these deals. Now, if they have a close relationship with America, that makes them less reliant on these non-Western countries. And they do have the potential, if America, if you don't have, Democrats telling them they can't limit immigration or things, we have better American leadership, then they can make themselves a lot stronger. But they have to be more realistic with this. And a lot of the claims that like everything bad in Europe is due to America, it's like this idea, it's like this third wave feminist idea where women have no agency, and anything bad they do, if like they choose to go home with a guy that then they regret, that's not their fault. Right. It's like that with Europe, but instead like Europe is blaming another guy, not even the guy they went home with, for being responsible for this. It's like, why did you make me do this? I wouldn't be surprised if some of these guys claim the CIA did the French Revolution and any other thing. And, CIA started World War I. It didn't exist at the time, but I'm sure that they'll blame it for this. Like, they have this whole fantasy that all of Europe was in complete peace and harmony. There was no one calling into question monarchies or anything that until suddenly, peace-loving Europe in 1945, we're going to ignore the two wars before then, suddenly got taken over by America. I mean, there was issues with American influence over Europe, and I think that they have grounds to criticize them. But then they imagine that they have zero agency, and that they have not had a lot of these left-wing trends and ideologies and movements in their own country, and that it's all just an America creation. And it's easier to just blame some outside party rather than to look into yourself and take responsibility. It's the same with these feminists. Whenever they do bad actions, they then pretend that they have no agency. It's always the men's fault. And you now see that a lot among, unfortunately, some Europeans. And I think they have to look at their bad leaders and their internal problems rather than imagining that once they, kick America out of its military bases, that they're suddenly going to turn, back into the Holy Roman Empire or something.
Yeah, I mean, well, they're just like, again, they're taking like the libtard presupposition, where if you see these like TikToks from like these European libtards, and there was one that I commented on the other day on Twitter where she was just like walking down the street, and there was like a group of Americans wearing these like tacky berets in Paris, and like all the vitriol and all the bandwidth for like xenophobic bandwidth that Europeans have gets expended on like American tourists like in Paris and Barcelona. And it's like, okay, like I get it. It's probably a little annoying. Like they are a little kitschy, but it's like, is that really where you're going to, again, spend all of your like xenophobic bandwidth is on American tourists? Like I think you have a little bit bigger fish to fry. And I'm not saying that like our more like our right wing guys in Europe are doing that, but they apply that to the upper echelon where again, they're like, no, it's to your point, like this weird idea that the Americans are just simply restraining the European right. But I guess that kind of hits at another theme in the Trump speech, which I think should be a breath of fresh air for a lot of, again, these guys are our friends in Europe that are on the right. Again, they have sort of the same presuppositions that a lot of us in MAGA have. is that, look, they want Europe to be strong. They want Europe to, again, kind of reclaim a lot of that former glory again, to be able to throw their weight around on the global stage. We've already outlined why, as it stands right now, it's going to be difficult to see how that sort of manifests, but that is what they want. That's what they aspire. They want to see, again, their countries consolidate around a national identity again. They want to see an end to mass migration. So when Trump comes out and he says, like, look, Americans have this link to Europe. There's no question about that. We want to see a strong Europe. And then he explicitly says mass migration is what is undercutting Europe's reemergence. He says, like, without that, until you mop that situation up, there is no going back. You can't have both. And he goes on and he explains in Minnesota, he's like, look, Americans aren't, we're not exempt from this. If anything, in many cases, it's worse in America. And then he sort of explicitly points out Somalia, how Somalians have flooded into Minnesota. He's like, Somalia is not even a real country, which is true, by the way. So it's like, I think if you're on the European right and you see that, that's the refined Trump speech. That is what the group gets together and they say, okay, this isn't an off the cuff Trump remark. This is the consolidated, again, aim and goals of the Trump administration. I think they should see that, and they should see that as a white pill.
Oh, absolutely. I think they should focus on that. Even this situation with European nationalists, I think they should see this as an opportunity for themselves to exert themselves and to show how they would present stronger leadership than the pathetic leaders of Europe, that they would know how to deal with America, and that they would be capable of showing greater resolve than what these European leaders do, and then we saw this in trade deals, trade negotiations last year. When Trump initiated his tariffs against Europe, they all, thumped their chests and like, dude, we're going to retaliate in kind. And then they went in negotiations, realized they were the weaker party, and had a complete capitulation to America. Yeah. They always want to make these empty threats and do this scolding. And I think this is showing the pathetic leadership of Europe and how they need real right-wing nationalists who understand the real issues of Europe and are able to build a more positive relationship with America, that they are able to exert more independence and force within Europe and build up their defense capabilities, and are not, succumbing to all these stupidity around eliminating their nuclear energy or engaged in these idiotic regulations that kill the economies of Europe, and they're able to build up a strong independent Europe. And now we can treat them more like equals that they demand to be treated. And they're more capable of having this resolve, rather than doing this insult Trump publicly, insult America publicly, and then in private negotiations and in text messages, they, bow their heads. They're like, we're sorry, Mr. Trump, we love you. And then they get out of the meeting and they immediately start trashing Trump. I think that this presents them an opportunity. It also presents an opportunity to reassess NATO, reassess these other global institutions that maybe aren't in the best interest of Europe, or not in the best interest of America, and then could be properly assessed to be more nationalist and right wing. So I think that it does present an opportunity, and Trump has made that clear. And the real issue with Europe is not Greenland, it is mass migration. Mm-hmm. And it is rather disappointing to see a lot of normal Europeans. I don't think this is the case with European nationalists and right-wingers, but with a lot of Europeans, that they're more outraged by Greenland than they are about these migrant rape gangs and all these other terrible things that are visited upon them by mass migration. But then they start marching in the streets and turning on America. And because Americans are a safe force, are a safe target for xenophobia. No one's going to call you a racist for being anti-American. You can, in fact, be anti-racist by being anti-American, because look, they elected that bigot Donald J. Trump. So we're now showing we're so superior to them. But then, if they see, some Pakistani gang threatening them, like, we're going to focus on the evil American tourists instead of these guys running a rape gang. So I think I'm not saying that that's the case with all Europeans, because Europeans are waking up to this issue. Right. And that's why so many of them are turning towards these right-wing parties and nationalist parties. And I think there is a growing awareness of the real issues, but then a lot of them get, distracted by Greenland stuff, and it leads to the situation we're in right now.
Yeah. And I think that's what these right-wing parties, and I mean, because, I'm pretty hard on specifically Reform UK. I just don't think they're sufficiently positioned to, again, enact what I think is popular policy in England. I think they have similar sentiments on immigration that Americans do, and they just don't seem well equipped to do that. And I think what these parties should learn is they should take a look at what happened in Canada, where Poilievre again, postured himself like, the conservative candidate. He was going to mop up the mess that, the liberals left, that Trudeau left. But he just couldn't resist it, like taking little snips at Trump every once in a while, or again, capitulating on certain things. So Trump just said like, okay, well, just like screw you. I'm just going to like completely derail your ambitions. And I think if you're like a right-wing party in Europe, you need to take a look at that and react accordingly. This isn't to say that you need to like glaze them at every turn, but it's just like, again, is applauding, and I'm not saying they all did this, but is like applauding Mark Carney after he gives this speech, basically just attributing every evil in the world to Trump, like a smart idea. Because again, I mean, back to our earlier point, Mark Carney, if you like go look at hot mic moments, he's quite cordial to Trump when the cameras aren't on. He's quite friendly to Trump, but then on stage he gives this like riveting speech about how the global order has been completely upended by this madman and this sort of thing. And I'm like, I think if you're on the European right, coming out decisively against that kind of rhetoric will actually play well in the long term. It guarantees that the Trump administration, when it's time, will play ball with your government. He clearly rewards loyalty on the global stage. I mean, he's quite friendly with Hungary. Although the situation in Hungary is sort of devolving a little bit, but even look at Bukele. He's very friendly with Bukele. So it's like even Milei like glazes him a little too much sometimes. So it's like clearly Trump will reward loyalty on the global stage. And if you're a European, that they may instigate a little bit of insecurity, saying like, hey, why do we have to suck up to this guy? We should be on our own 2 feet. But the situation as it stands is like, look, you are minnows on the global stage if you're just a random country. And it is worthwhile to, again, at least look for an alliance, look for building a relationship, because the Trump administration is not one guy. It's not just Trump. It's not just Stephen Miller. It's an entire apparatus. There's a lot of people that make up the Trump administration. You can build those relationships. You can start to build that repertoire early on. So then again, if you are poised to take leadership in your country, then you will have those existing relationships. I just don't understand the impulse from Europeans to, again, not steelman Trump when he's saying some of these off-the-cuff comments. Like you said at the opening of the show, it's like Trump does behave like Trump. He's been around for 10 years now. If you don't understand how he operates by now, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, Trump always respects strength. I mean, look at his relationship with Xi. I mean, Xi, he realizes this guy actually has power and what his words make sense. He's not doing this overt, they'll make anti-American statements, but it's, reasonable, or I don't want to actually.
It's Lindy anti-Americanism.
They're coming from a point of strength. This is a power that they have to respect. Yeah. It's the same with Putin. It's the same with a lot of these other emerging powers. But when Canada and Europe are engaged in this rhetoric and they go far more insulting, far more provocative towards Trump, and it's not coming from a position of strength. It's coming from a position of weakness. It's also coming from a perspective where Trump or in America has been providing their defense, has been providing the shield from the rest of the world, to where they've been able to have these generous welfare states that they can no longer support, but they still want to keep up. Then they pretend that they are on the equal stature of America, and then that pisses off Trump. And we're seeing this even with Carney. Carney, Trump made a great point that like Canada is a product of us. Like you owe us. You need to choose your words wisely rather than provoking us. And Carney, far more than the rest of Europe, is trying to provoke us more. I mean, he was just in China making these deals, really signaling with his speech, because his speech is like, oh, we're now going to have a new order where the middle powers are working. No, what he means is the middle powers are now going to go align themselves with China because they somehow think that China will support liberal democracy more than America will, or whatever they think. It's so much nonsense. And they think they can do this while being to our border. And sometimes I wince at, anti-European rhetoric. I don't really like it. Sometimes a lot of the neocons made the rhetoric around the Iraq War, and that was very stupid. And I generally don't tend to think that. I mean, we come from Europe. Most of Americans come from Europe, so we've always had this special relationship. So we shouldn't pretend they're like China. But when it comes to Canada, no, we shouldn't have. I hate this stuff where anyone's talking about like our brother nation of Canada. I hate that. And everyone was making those points like last year, like Trump needs to be impeached. He made the conservatives lose. Like, they're libtards. Like, the conservatives suck. Like, they back all the hate speech laws. They're not even good on immigration. I mean, Poilievre only got good on immigration when he realized he lost, and because he didn't address that. And his immigration stance was not that, in the campaign, was not that radically different from Carney's. Mm-hmm. And we're supposed to care this guy who's anti-Trump, not really good on the issues, loses, and it's Canada. we don't give a shit about Canada. I'm sorry if I'm not allowed to swear
you're
on
good.
you.
We're on Rumble. You're good.
But actually, but it's for Canada. We have to say this. Like
So true.
Really in a way with Carney's actions, we might have to consider a Maduro raid on Ottawa with Carney. That would not be be but it'd be really funny.
It'd be great. Install the Quebecois as like the ruling party.
That would be the funniest move. Like we would just have to build like a 100-foot statue of Trump for that happen. But not good on the world stage. I'm not supporting it, but it would be really fun. And this guy just has no idea like what it is. And he's like inviting China into our backyard just because he doesn't like this dangerous bigot of Trump. And he's like, oh, he's so mean. He's not very nice to immigrants and all this nonsense. And then he gives this full-on anti-American speech and what Trump watches. Canadians really need to learn their place. Because all Canadian identity is based around not being American.
Yeah, literally.
And they like to think that, there's more of an identity for these European countries, but for Canada, it's just not being American.
Yeah.
They split off because they didn't get included in the American Revolution. The War of 1812 is an important event because they stopped the evil Americans from conquering them, and so it's a big part of their identity to not be American because they sound like us, have a similar cultural background and everything, and what makes them different is not being American. It's like imagine just a giant Vermont. They're still good Canadians. We're not insulting all Canadians, not all Canadians. But a lot of their leadership and everything, and they don't even have like the real right-wing movements that Europe does.
Yeah,
so
literally.
I do get sick of the Canadian lectures.
Yeah, you just go through Poilievre's Twitter and he's just talking about like bread and milk prices. It's like, dude, you just don't get. It's literally just like Reddit as a country. Yeah, it's like overused now. Everyone's calling everything Reddit, but Canada is literally like the Reddit republic. Like it. I'm not endorsing the Maduro style raid either. I'm just saying like.
No, we strongly disavow it.
Let's just disavow, but like. We'll take a look. If it comes across the desk, we'll take a look. But Scott, thank you so much.
If he becomes an anti-China guy, we might have to do it.
Yeah,
or not an anti-China guy, or becomes a full China stooge. But we disavow. But thanks for having me on.
Yeah, dude. Don Road Doctor, what are you gonna do? So, Scott, appreciate you, dude. We are running out of time here, but where can people find you, and where can people grab your new book coming out?
Yeah, so follow my Substack, highly-respected.com. You can find all my work there. Follow me on X at Scott M. Greer, and you can pre-order my book at passage.press. That's the URL. White Pill, the online writing, the making of Trump's America.
I love it, dude. Well, thank you so much for hopping on. I'll catch you next time.
Thank you.
All right, well, that was the great Scott Greer. Yeah, dude. As soon as I saw these Euros mouthing off, I saw Scott instantly going in and just settling scores. It was really a beautiful thing. So I'm going to send you guys over to another great Dvory Darkins. We love him. You know him. You love him. You see him after me every day. So I'm going to get that raid going for you fine gentlemen and gentlewomen. Ladies, I hear is what they're calling them these days. And I'm going to send you boys and gals over there. Let me see if I can do it. I'm working by myself today. No producer. We literally can't even fit him in here. Because we're like literally just in a bedroom. Basically, it's really something a sight to behold. So let me get that raid going. Boom, raid. I think I got it figured out. Yes, it's working. It's working. Oh, we're so back. All right, the raid is going. Let's do some housekeeping. X and Instagram at Real Tate Brown. You need to be following me on Twitter. A lot of people are saying that I thought I was following you already. I didn't even realize that I wasn't following you. So make sure you're following me on Twitter. or on X. So I don't want to dead name it. And I'll give you guys some updates. With that, I will see you guys tonight on Timcast IRL at 8 p.m. And thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys later.